double check that that's working. Yep, that is working. All right. We should be live online. Let me do one more thing. There's that. I need to share my screen and share. And there's Krista. All right. So we have Krista, we have Matt, we have Josh, and Eric. You are here, so we do have a quorum. Eric, you can call the meeting to order.
Are you recording it?
Oh, good point. Yes, let's do that too. Thanks, Peggy.
This conference will now be recorded.
Now it's recording.
Okay. Let's officially call this meeting April 21st, 2021 Park and Recreation meeting. First on the agenda, the approval of minutes from last meeting.
We're going to start with public comment, but since there's nobody from the public, we would skip that.
Yep.
Okay, and Eric, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Josh, aye.
Krista, aye.
Eric, aye.
Matt, aye.
Okay, the motion is carried.
Okay.
So, public comment is John Bush. I know he said something earlier. John, anyone there with us to make public comment?
John Bush is not logged in as far as I can see.
He sent an email. He sent it to you and I assumed you replied back.
I sent him the link, but he is not logged in as of yet.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
So moving on. Treasurer's report, correct? Matt, your show, I guess.
Yep. You can see the first slide is the summary slide. Again, favorable is up, and the net you see there, we're up from 21K favorable as of the end of February to 53K favorable at the end of March overall. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see the revenue portion of that.
Hold on. There.
Okay, so you can see revenue is 21K of that, and all of it is the levy coming in just ahead of plan. And then you'll see expenses. If you go to the next slide, is the remaining 32K.
Oops, sorry, too fast.
It's okay.
Try that again. Down.
One more, yeah. One more back.
Wait, did I miss the... Hold on. I might have hidden that slide for some reason.
Yeah, I think it's hidden. You can just manually go to that page.
I'm trying, hold on. I don't know why it's hidden. Or did I, you know what I did? I clicked the wrong one when I put it in the PowerPoint. Hold on 1 second. That's on me totally. And I may not have it there. Apologies. This might take a second here. There we go. Expenses.
Yeah, okay, so now you can see expenses. There's the 32K, and it's evenly split between, oops.
There it is.
There you go, evenly split between admin and maintenance and programs. So,
And fund balances?
yeah, fund balances are on plan.
Okay. Any questions on the treasurer's report?
Want to go on to the vouchers?
Let's move on to the vouchers. So since this was released on Friday, we have a few new items. We had the Visa bill come through, some supplies for clam digging, some stakes, a playground sign, and some office supplies. And the playground sign, I'll send out an email with a picture of that. It was just replacing a worn out thank you to the community sign. So that's now up again in the park. The invoice for a light, and then we had Horizon, some irrigation supplies, and some herbicides. And I believe that might have been it. That was it. Any questions on the vouchers?
Can you scroll down to the total, Doug, and remind?
Can do. Is everybody hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure, because Carrie said she lost audio. Carrie, it's just you.
Okay, if there are no questions, I'll make a motion to approve the vouchers from the M&O fund for a total of $88,419.83.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Josh, aye.
Krista, I.
Matt, aye.
Eric, aye.
Okay.
Okay, motion is carried.
All right, next up is the staff report. So we have, let me make this a little, let's do that. There we go. So we have some programs that are actually starting up. We did have Magic Club starting today, which was nice to see, you know, them outside and doing their magic. And my screen seems to have frozen for a second. Okay, there we go. We had Canine Nosework filled up quickly for May 2nd, and we've got other programs that we're projecting coming out. This is all assuming, of course, that we do stay in phase 3 and do not go back to phase 2, as some other counties have already done. Summer activity guides being distributed throughout the island. We've written off indoor pickleball for the summer, and we'll focus on the outdoors. We hope to be able to use the gyms again once the weather cools. City of Langley and Island County are now accepting permits, so we will be opening registration for the triathlon. And we can offer more programs now that we're into phase 3. So all of that's good news. Here's some pictures of our intro to pickleball and Nordic walking, and our first day back at outdoor pickleball. For facilities and grounds, we are in the heart of spring and are just playing catch up. Everything is in full growth mode. Spring sports are in full swing, and the park is busier than we've seen it in a long time. The soccer club and the Little League are both in full swing. Fields are being used pretty much most every day. We've got the pickup games back and running now that the limit is up to 50 per pickup game. And we're focusing right now on getting garbage cans back out on the lake sites and cleaning up for the start of the lowland fishing season this coming weekend, which the 24th, I believe, is when it starts. For me, it's kind of a short one for me. I was on vacation for a week, so there wasn't a ton that I got lapped up into, but David Ode finishing up the first draft of the Small Water System Management Plan. I actually received it this afternoon, the first draft, so I'm going to start digging through that and making sure that everything's good with that tomorrow. We received a letter from the County Health Department on the playground plans. I met with Susan Wagner on those items. and what we'll need to address. Last Friday, I have reached out to Davido on some of those because one of the big items on there, and I've included that in the main meeting, but we'll talk more about it there, is one of the big items there is the need for a septic system design and a water system design. Before they'll approve us going into phase 1 of design, we need to have those kind of mapped out. So that's coming. Matt and I met with the pool consultants as well as with the foundation on some preliminary results on the market analysis, and we had an initial pickleball meeting with myself, with Eric and Krista, Carrie, and Barry Hayworth, and Susan was the other person. Susie was the other person. I don't remember her last name off the top of my head, but some good discussion that we're going to follow up on in the regular agenda as well. That's all I've got on the staff report. Most of it's going to be in the regular agenda. Any questions on the staff report?
Doug, do you know what day we're going to open triathlon registration?
Carrie, have you got your sound back? I haven't got a particular day. Carrie or Peggy, if you have a specific day that you're going to start that figured out yet?
It's going to be hopefully very soon. There's a little bit that we're trying to figure out with our registration system that I would like to get squared away before we open registration, but probably, hopefully within a week.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on the staff report? Okay. Eric, unfinished business next.
Okay. Moving into unfinished business, we will.
All right. So,
Sorry.
Not a problem. So unfinished business. Comprehensive plan is really the only item in there. I did receive a letter from the county health department. It was the county health response to the site plan review. There are some items that we need to look at. Most of those are relating to septic system design, water system design, but there is one item of the spigots need to have a design of an item below them as a catchment basin. So we're looking at doing like a dry well where the water would go into the dry well and have a place to go, so it wouldn't just have the food stuff and product sitting right on the top. That would just wash away into the dry well. I've reached out to Davido to have an initial conversation on those items. These are items that we're going to have to do anyways, so it's not like it's going to be an extra cost. It's just going to be something that we're going to do sooner rather than later. So I'll have more information on that once I sit down with Davido, but I did just meet with Susan on Friday, and it's been kind of a whirlwind since then trying to get a hold of Davido. We do have the small water system management plan draft. That will have to go to the state. That's one of the items on their list, is getting water approval from the state. We've already done the capacity analysis that the state already has. So this is the second piece of the puzzle for the state. I think that's the last piece of the puzzle for the state. So I will be following up with them on that once we have that done. Aquatic facility update. Matt, I'm going to let you jump in on this one as much as you want. We did have a meeting with the consultant and the foundation on preliminary market conditions report to look at the results, and had some discussion on the stakeholder meetings. Received a quote from Edge Analytical on water testing. That I'm going to discuss in a separate line item in new business. And also on future expenses for the swimming pool project down later in new business. So those two items we'll discuss in a little bit. But Matt, you want to comment on the aquatic facility update, the kind of where we are with the survey and what's coming up next?
Yeah, a couple quick updates. So if you saw the paper today, I was interviewed by Kyrie Erickson about the survey. In the end, we got more than 1,700 surveys, which is ridiculously crazy, but good. We realized we didn't get to the seniors because we failed to get in their newsletter at the end of March. So we did a separate survey through Senior Resources and got another 200 responses on top of the ones we'd gotten otherwise. So we got some senior specific responses that were good. A couple other things that we've done. Doug and I and Krista were all in on the port meeting, made a presentation to them, trying to get them to issue a resolution in support of the project. They asked us for a draft that highlights the economic impact of the facility, so I'm working on that to hopefully get back in their next meeting and get them to give us a resolution in support, which would be good. We also submitted there was a short notice window with the federal budget, the calendar year 2022 budget, to submit what's called a community project funding request through Congressman Larson in Legislative District 2, formerly known as the earmark process. That was suspended for 4 years under the previous administration, but has now been restored. So Congressman Larson was taking applications for to nominate up to 10 projects to go into the budget cycle for 2022. So we submitted a request for the pool. Total request was for $4.6 million, based on some guidance that they gave us when I was talking to their community liaison here in Everett. So that went in. We'll find out more about that in the coming weeks, whether or not we made the cut or if we were get a chance to present, to try to get to be one of the 10 projects. Yeah, that's probably the highlights. The one thing I want to highlight on the demographics that Doug mentioned of the survey, or the demographics that came from this third-party consultant that's doing the feasibility study. We'd always been planning around a number of just under 16,000 for the served population in the district. Their census data tells us it's actually more like 19,000 now. So that was good news, because it adds to the potential user population. And then they established a secondary service area that goes up to Coopville, essentially, and that bumps the total number is in the pool of potential users to 29,000 or 28,000. So good data to have to figure out how many people would use the facility and to make sure that it's the right size for the potential user population. So, all right, that's the latest. Any questions on any of that?
Yeah, Matt, any idea on the 10 project? If they accept 10, how many are generally received in total? Any idea on that? Like, are we talking 100?
Oh, you mean how many did the Congressman Larson's office receive?
How many do they actually get?
Yeah, their liaison wouldn't tell me, but my belief is because the window was so short, they announced it and basically said you had 7 days to create an application, and it was relatively lengthy. My guess is it's probably less than 30, maybe even less than 20. Just because, like I said, this year was such a short cycle. Next year, maybe it's more like 70, 75 or 100. This year, it's a much smaller number.
Seems like that might work to our advantage.
Yeah, the hope is, we had a couple things going for us. One, Doug's done a good job of doing liaison with their office. We hosted them in the park. They came to TrustNet Trails. So they know us. They know South Whidbey Parks and Rec District. They know the island. They know about this pool project. So we had a lot of things just in terms of awareness going in our favor. And we were one of the few projects that actually met their original timeline. I found out later there was only a couple, and everybody else was asking for delays and waivers and extensions and such. So I think we got some points anyway in the early analysis that it may do us no good, but at least I think we're set up to get a window or get a look. So yeah, it's you can't win if you don't play. So
yeah, the only other thing I would add to that is Matt, we had provided a letter for the North Whidbey Parks and Rec District on their boiler project, boiler replacement. In return, they are working on a letter for us. I have yet to see the letter though, so I will be getting on them about getting that back to us.
Yeah. Support. That was one of the criteria for the application to Congressman Larson was the level of community support that we had, and so we were able to show about 15 letters from stakeholders plus the Langley City Council resolution and support. We Foundation got a letter from Melanie Bacon. They got a letter from Helen Price Johnson. So we had 1,700 survey responses that we could point to as evidence of community support. So we had a lot of data, and this North Whidbey Parks and Rec letter will just add to that, and they're going to take that as an additional late submission from us as soon as we have it. So
okay, I'll follow up with her tomorrow. The Waterman property. So talked with our grants manager, and I was looking at how do we wrap this up so that we can reimburse the bond with the money that we had left. How do we finish this project? What else do we need to do? One of the requirements is that we post signage from the RCO stating it was sponsored by the RCO grant program, which is fine. We can do that. But it brought me to the kind of the thought of we really need entry signage. There is a trail that goes onto that property that would allow us to put an entry sign on it, on our property, because it comes across from the school property right next door onto our property. I'm looking at potentially getting a sign similar to what we have at Community Park, at Trussell End Trails, at the sports complex. This is a new kind of property in our mix. I want to have that, highlighted as a park district property. But in order to put up a sign, we need a name. And while the Watermans are wonderful people, I personally don't know that we want to name it the Waterman property. They did give us $20,000 off, but they didn't donate the property to the district. So I don't know that we want to recognize it with a full-on naming. To me, that would be going too far. But it's not something we need a snap decision tonight. Let's make a decision and name this property so we can put up a sign. I would like to kick around the idea, and I've got an agenda item later on that. Once we have that done and we have the sign up, we can kind of close that out, and then we can follow through with the promise that the board made to the community that once we got these grants done and we got all this work done, we were going to reimburse that bond as much as possible and drop that rate way down. So that's I just wanted to give you an update on that. That's where we are, and we'll talk about naming and all that stuff later on in the agenda. Any other questions on comprehensive plan items before I have Eric move us on? Okay. Eric, next would be new
Moving on
business.
New business. The Waterman property being first.
All right. So I don't really need to bring anything up to show you on this. I've kind of laid the groundwork already on this one. What we're looking at here is we've got two 20-acre parcels. We've got 40 acres. Everybody knows this. This is a property out there. The ideas I really had were, and in talking with staff, where we could name it. We could name it for features of the property, plant life on the property. What else, other purposes that we would have for the property. What do we want to do with the property? Those are kinds of discussions that we could look at. The other tact we could take, and I'm not necessarily recommending this, is we could name it for someone in the history of the park district that has done a lot of things for the park district. A Kurt Gordon, a Jim Porter, whoever else, on that list. And we could do that kind of thing. I think most of those, all of the people that I mentioned are still living. So I don't know if we want to honor them with a park name, unless it's posthumous. I don't know that. That's up to you guys. The other thing that we could do is we could look at going out to the community and getting community suggestions. We own this property. We're looking at putting a name on it. Right now, I think when we bought it, the idea was to expand upon the trail system next door. But I don't, and it has to be outdoor recreation, so we can't go and put a rec center over there. I don't think we really have the desire to bulldoze it. I don't, and put in more sports fields. So really, it becomes kind of an outdoor space for. It could be just walking trails. It could be we could look at that and go, we're going to fence it and make it a dog park. We could look at it and go, we're going to put a bunch of trails in, but it's going to be mountain bikes, and that's going to be a mountain bike park. There's a bunch of different options, but I wanted to kind of start the discussion today and go, what do you want me to do for next time? Do you want me to go out to the community and ask them for suggestions? Do you want to look at features of the property? Everybody go out and take a look at it and look at what's on the property and give us ideas as to what you think we should name it. So I'm going to open that for discussion.
Yeah, and I'll just say, Doug, Jen and I, as Trails Committee, as your board Trails Committee, our nominal plan is what Doug said there in the middle, which is work with the school group who built the trails and signed the trails in the adjacent property, and just extend that trail system into this park. So the same size, type, look and feel, so single track trails versus the wider trails that we put in some of the other properties, and leverage that school volunteer group as our labor to help us put those signs up and to add the trails. There are already a number of trails in there, single track type, so we're not talking major construction, but do that all with the volunteers, and just have as light a hand as possible in the work. So that's the combined recommendation of Jen and I.
I'm in total agreement with Matt and Jen, it sounds like, as well. I have a suggestion, and I thought about this actually when you brought it up originally, Doug. And this may be too much, but I know my own children and many children that have gone to the elementary school, the intermediate school, as the schools have changed, have named, worked, used, explored those trails immensely. Just a thought that kids love to have the ability to be in on the creation of the naming part. And I know that Susie Richards is a wonderful person to work with on that. She's pro that kind of thing. And I would like to suggest that would be a really cool way to approach it, being we don't necessarily have a specific name in mind right now.
Right.
That as a possibility of letting those kids that are going to be using those trails all the time have buy-in to maybe creating the name as well, or names of. Matt mentioned, like different trails have different names and whatnot, but that's my suggestion. I'd be happy to help facilitate that.
I think
I like that idea.
Good idea. But also, what about talking to the group that did so much in the first place, the Shelley Ackerman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe just touching base with them as well, because they did do so much for it.
So my thought would be a community kind of, hey, submit your name kind of thing, and we'll reach out to Susie Richards and Shelley Ackerman and say, we're looking to have a name for the park, the property. We want to get away from calling it. We keep calling it the Waterman property because that's who we bought it from, who the previous owner was. Let's look at, what do you think we should name this? What should this be called? Open that up to the school kids, open that up to the community, open that up to Shelley Ackerman and her group. What should we call this? And let them submit names to us, and we'll see what we get. And I can get that out there via email. And Eric, thank you. I have contact with Susie Richards. I can certainly touch base with her on that and get her started on that. We can open it up to everybody, all the schools. I'm good with all of that. Like, as many suggestions as we can get would be great. And then the board can review those and make a decision, or decide they want to submit one of their own. Everybody in the community, even the commissioners, would be eligible to submit a suggestion. So that was my thought, and I like the idea of reaching out to those groups as well as any other community groups we can think of. What do you think we should name it? But those two, especially since they border that property and they were instrumental in acquiring the property.
It might be on Chris's note that that group, that Ackerman group that did so much work on it, that they might be the group or might want to facilitate the picking of the name from the many that are generated. So they rather than us making that final decision, they could actually come up with that piece of it and then recommend it to the board or however, we want to approach that. But that would empower them to have a little bit of recognition for all the work that they've put in.
I can talk to Shelley about that. I don't know how organized her group is anymore now that we've acquired the property, but I can certainly talk to her and see if that's something they could do. I don't have a problem with that. It would have to go through approval of the board, and the board could look at them and go, "You're nuts. We're not doing that." But I think that maybe they come up with their top 3, and this is our number 1, this is our number 2, this is our number 3, and the board can go, well, the number 1 is not appropriate, we're not going to do that, but number 2 is great, we're going to put that one in place. Does that sound good to everybody on the board?
It does to me. What I envision is somebody like Shelley, who's so outgoing, and other people in that group, maybe even having the power to go. That's why I wanted to entrust it to them, that they'd get a kick out of going to a school like the elementary school, for example, and saying, here's what is exciting. We have this acreage that we're going to make trails on, and in education, I know that age group would just, that would be really cool for them to on both ends of that, for Shelley's group to see the end result by being able to present it and be in that process. And then for the kids to have kind of and I'm not saying just kids, it can be community members as well. I'm just saying because they're so close in proximity, that would be an aspect of it that would be just really nice to have the Ackerman group empowered to do that.
I don't have a problem with that.
Well, does anyone know what is the school called the adjacent property?
I don't know if they have a name for it. I have not heard of one.
Are you talking about the elementary school?
Yeah, the trails back there, the AmeriCorps trails or whatever, is their official name.
I know that they've named the trails. I don't know that they've named the property.
Yeah, so we should ask that question too. If that already has a name, maybe we just use that name.
Okay. Well, sounds to me like I should go ahead and reach out to the schools or reach out to Shelley Ackerman and start that process. And hopefully, is everybody comfortable with me talking to Shelley on that and getting that going and getting them on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll get that moving then. All right. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, new business B. So this is really kind of a twofold thing. I wanted to bring this up, number one, because I did get the quote. This is what the board directed us to do with the water quality and testing this for all of these items. This is not a huge bill. This is something that we can easily absorb within our budget. It's not a problem. $472 is not going to be an issue. What I do want to have the discussion on, and I'm going to ask you guys to move second and approve this purchase, and I'm going to recommend doing it. But I wanted to have the discussion about the idea that the money that we have is our M&O levy and our M&O money. It is for maintenance and operations. And this is kind of, we don't have anything set aside for this kind of thing other than we do have money that we say is projects fund. It's not separated out in its own special fund. It's just part of our total money. We can use some of that for this, and that's what we've been trying to do, is set aside all that cash and hold on to that so that we have money for this kind of thing. That can vary, year to year as to what we have in that account. And what I kind of wanted to talk about was process going forward as we get bills, coming in for stuff to do with pool design, pool planning, pool, things like this are not an item in our maintenance and operations budget. So what I'd like to do is have the process where anything like that is not part of our M&O, I need to bring to the board for approval. Is that and then we need to look at where that money's coming from, and if it's got to come out of M&O, what are we sacrificing to make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, generally, I just say I think that's totally reasonable. This particular case.
This particular case.
This is our what? Yeah, it's our water system. So it's 7-0. So we need to do it. We need to know what's in our water, and it's something we should just budget for every year or whatever the periodicity is required. And for all of those compounds and substances, the inorganic, organic, everything.
So this is, I will say this, it is not a required, this is not a required, what we are required to test for, we already test for, and that's already budgeted for. This is above and beyond what we would normally test for. So maybe this is a 5-year item or something like that. This is not an annual item. Yes,
Sure.
Matt, this
Sure.
within our budget.
No, I understand. But we test, the only requirements that we test for very minimal
Correct.
things, right? So to me, I think it's just in our best interest, since the community drinks this water or may drink this water, that we know what's in it more than we do right now.
Mm-hmm.
Doug, can this be just a regular line item that, that is money put aside knowing that expenses are going to come up? Is that a possibility in the budget?
In future budgets, yes, we could totally do this. For this particular item, and I'm really, like, straight up, I'm not concerned about this particular item. This particular item, I have no problem with doing it. I think it's a great thing to do. I just want to set kind of I don't want to be suddenly going down the road and going, all of a sudden we've got, design fees that we're looking at, and we're talking in the thousands of dollars, and we haven't got a budget set aside, and we have no process for how we do that. So what I wanted to do is kind of set the tone with this and go, all right, I know it's our water system. I know it's not specific to this, but it is, the only reason we are doing it is that was brought to our attention via the foundation and the process going towards the pool. Okay, so I have no problem. This one, yes, I think we can add this to our regular budget next year. Krista.
And aren't we going to have possibly similar situations concerning the campground as well? Or do we already have like a bucket for that project?
We have money for that project already from grants that is sitting there. That is a separate item. So when we're doing stuff for the campground, when we talk about the design of the septic system, we have grant dollars that are set aside for specific items on the campground. If it's not specific to the campground, I can use those. I just can't get reimbursed half of it from the grant monies. So yes, there is a separate bucket for the campground.
So then, are there any other projects that we're starting to work on that, in addition to the pool, that are not already allocated in some way? Like, for example, pickleball. I know
pickleball.
We've already, kind of designated some funds in this year's budget. We just discussed the campground. So, is there anything else
pickleball is one of those, and trails, for example. I guess within the trails reimbursement, if there was expenses associated with trail building, then they could be paid from that. But pickleball for sure.
So the thing I would say is Krista, that any project that we look at where we'd have to, and I'm not specifically making this specific to the aquatics facility. I think anything that we don't have actually active in our budget. If we look at the amphitheater, when we've done all the designs for the amphitheater, that's been done pro bono. That time was donated. Anything to do with sports fields, if we're looking at an artificial turf field, anything that I do that would have to have a cost, it's not in the budget. I should be bringing it to the board for board approval on that, regardless of the cost of that item. And that's kind of what I'm saying is I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to hide anything from the board. I want this all to be above board and everybody sees what we're doing. But yes, pickleball, we do have a line item right now in the capital budget. It's a $35,000 line item for this year for pickleball. And at the end of the year, if we don't spend that, the board could defer that and put that in its own little separate bucket and say that's for pickleball next year.
Yeah, and the so far project expenses like that have all come before the board, right? Like
yes, yeah. I just wanted to address
the septic thing, the small water system management plan. Yeah.
Yep.
I guess the question I was asking is can we create a fund specifically knowing that these expenses are going to come up related to the pool in particular, knowing that's one of those items? I'm asking.
Yeah. No, for sure. Absolutely sure.
Yeah, we can. It becomes a question of what do we give up in order to do that, because there's a finite amount of money. We get a good amount of money from the constituents, but it is a finite amount. And so at a certain point, we have done what we've done to kind of set up that projects fund for that purpose. But I wanted to kind of let you guys say to everybody, this is how I'm going to approach this. This is what I think we need to do. Every time there's an expense that goes out of that fund, since we don't have a specific line item budget that says, okay, we're going to do design work on this and that's going to cost us X number of dollars, and we don't know what's coming down that pipe right now. So I want to have that process in place where I can't spend that money, even though I have authority to spend that money. I can't spend that money on something that is not on a current thing we're doing unless I come to the board and get approval. And I think that's the best way for us to do it.
Yeah, and remember, so there's a couple of guiding documents, right? The first and foremost is the comprehensive plan. So we have the comprehensive plan says between 2018 and 2023, we are going to try to do these major projects. One of them is trails, one of them is the pool, one of them is rec center. Pickleball is not in there, but so you start with the comp plan, and then what we said in 2019 is we were going to do a survey of the public to have the public tell us when we did have $10,000 to spend, or we did have a decision to take on an expense, what should be our priority out of those comprehensive plan projects. So Doug put that survey out. We got 700 responses back, and we have the data that tells us the public said, this was our number one, which happened to be the pool. Our number two was trails. Our number three, I can't remember. So we should start with the comp plan as a general point, and then we should look to that survey, which we did, took time to do, and got the community to actually send us 700 answers or 680 answers as we make decisions like that. Like I said, it's just guiding principles.
Okay, so I would just ask the board to review the quote on this. Kind of know how I'm going to approach it going forward with anything further that's expenses for this kind of a thing. Staff recommends approval, $472 to have our water tested, or source water tested. We think it's a good idea to do it for the pool, but as well for, as Matt says, for just general usage in the park.
Doug, I think it's a great idea. And it's interesting, though, I have in front of me my own. I used Edge Analytical just recently within the last 3 months. Mm-hmm. And my bill was $160. And I'm looking at what they tested here. And I'm not trying to be nitpicky, but I sometimes think companies take advantage of bureaucracy. And so I'm not downplaying the legitimacy of what they're asking. I'm just making the statement that it's interesting that I had all these particular, I didn't have turbidity and fluoride, which I don't understand because we wouldn't have fluoride in the system anyway. I mean, I'm just questioning, are we really looking at this and saying, is everything on there exactly what we want? Or are we just getting a recommendation, hey, here's a ball of wax, $500 bill?
So, Eric, this list came from the consultants on the pool project for shower water and swimming pool water. So that's why we're testing for certain items in there. We need to know what base we're starting with. When we fill that pool, we need to know what we have to treat for. So that's why these items are all in there.
I thought it might be coming from the company. That's why I was asking. Thank you.
No, this is all us. So, Eric, anybody else have any other questions, or can we get a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to go ahead with this water test in the amount of $472.
I'll second that motion.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't hear the motion.
The motion was you approve $472 to be spent on the water testing. And the motion. So all those in favor of having the water tested, paying this bill $472, signify by saying aye.
Josh, aye.
Krista, I.
Matt, aye.
Eric, aye.
Okay, we'll get that done. All right. Next item, final item, pickleball courts. So we did have a really good discussion with our group there, with Barry Hayworth, with Carrie, with Krista, Eric, myself, and Susie, and really drilled down into, there's really nothing to see there. I don't know why I brought that up. I'm going to just do this because this is the last item. I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to bring that back up. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So we really did have a great discussion. I'm gonna just kind of give a brief overview of what we talked about. We talked about the pickleball group had asked if they could make some changes to our temporary kind of setup, and the things they asked about, the specifics they asked about, were adding an additional court in the parking lot, as well as putting up a kind of a speed bump water barrier there to keep the water off of that area, or keep the water from flowing through that area. I have talked with Tom about the water on that, and his recommendation was not to do anything like a speed bump because he did not feel that it would work, number one, and number two, it would be fairly costly since we would we'd have to contract for that. We don't do that. The painting of the additional court, really, I don't have a huge problem with it. The big traffic that we get up there is in the afternoons and evenings, and generally pickleball is not using it at that time. I would say that, maybe we don't, right now it's kind of crazy, so maybe we wait until summer, because right now with this soccer club, they're doing academy style work, which means everybody's there pretty much all the time on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So our park, if you swing by on Tuesday, Thursday, or Friday, that parking lot is packed to the gills. The fields are packed to the gills. I don't know that we'd want to dedicate an additional court right now, but you could say that, yes, you can paint an additional court this summer. I don't really have an issue with that. The other discussion we had on all of that was going towards the idea of permanent courts. We had discussion about 4 permanent courts in our previous meetings with the board. In discussions with Barry and prior to our meeting, he had said, well, he wanted to have the 4 courts, but then he also wanted to keep the ones in the parking lot. And I'm like, well, if we need more than 4 courts, why don't we just build more than 4 courts? We can go for grants. We can get, and if we have a good plan, we can get that money. To me, if I'm showing up and there's 4 courts that are built that are nice pickleball courts, and they're all full, and I look over and they say, oh, well, you can just go over and play in the parking lot. I'm going to go, I'm not going to go play in the parking lot. That's not going to happen. But that's just me. I would rather, in my mind, build 6 courts. And I think in our discussion, we kind of settled on the idea that 6 courts would be the ideal. 4 courts would be the minimum that we would need. Because right now we're maxing out with 3 courts already in the painted area on certain times. Now, does that mean we don't plan for peak usage? We don't build for peak usage. We build for what we generally need. But by the same token, I don't want to build something that's obsolete a year after we build it because it's full all the time and nobody can get on them and everybody's complaining that they can never get on a court. So my recommendation would be to build 6 and design for 6, and that's kind of what this agenda item was, is kind of update, bring it all up to the board and say, is everybody okay if we target 6 courts for the grant applications? Eric, Krista, you were both there. Any other additional things that I missed that I forgot about?
The one thing was Barry talking about like using the money that we've already allocated this year, and maybe them doing some kind of low-level fundraising to get enough to put in 2 courts this year, and then going after grants next year for the additional. So, for example, if we are going to go for 6, like, hey, why can't we build 2 this year? And then, go for grants for the other 4. But on one hand, it gets them to courts earlier. However, we may miss some opportunities for scale, saving money by just going ahead and doing all 6 at once. So that was another point. I did have a question, though. Did Tom have any suggestions as to how to mitigate the water in the parking lot in terms of short-term fixes for right now?
The water is that's just the way it drains. And it drains down the middle of that asphalt. So it's not designed to be a pickleball court. So it's not designed to flow off of that and sheet off of that as a pickleball court will. To redo that is basically what we're looking at doing with building new pickleball courts in a permanent status. So, I get that it's been a couple years, but we don't have funds that we can just go, yeah, let's just build 6 pickleball courts or 4 pickleball courts and throw it out there. I don't know that there's a solution. I can talk to Tom again and see. So, what would you suggest that we do about the water? I don't know that there's much we can do about water. That's just the way it flows. To set up a speed bump or a curb, then if we set up a curb, that would probably stop it, but we'd lose the parking area, which we don't want to do, especially if we're adding features to a park where more people are going to want to park. One of the big things that we have a problem with in community park is we really don't have enough designated parking. We've got places where people park on the grass, but we don't have enough designated parking stalls. And that's an issue I want to, infrastructure-wise, try to address as we go forward and look at all of this. When we're building any of this, just look at the idea of, okay, we've piecemealed a bunch of this stuff. Let's look at, okay, what do we really need to do to bring this up to grade? For instance, campground. When we're looking at the campground design of the septic system and the water connection, well, what do we need to upgrade? Do we need to make a bigger power panel at the pump house? Like, we've been just adding stuff to it. Does it need to be bigger? Does it need to be 3-phase as opposed to what's in there now? What do we have to do to really upgrade this so that we're good and we know what we've got? So I don't know that there is a quick solution, but I will bring that up to Tom.
What about the idea? I mean, yeah, and I'm looking back at the comp plan. This was not in the comp plan, so this is new, and it was also not in the community survey. So 6 courts seems like a lot for that, just to me. But when you were saying, Krista, about the idea of using the money that we have allocated, to me, what seems to make some sense is, what if we just use that money to raise the level off the end of the parking lot and turn their 4 courts into 6 courts right there?
I would like to speak to that just in terms of, I'm a fan of pickleball, not because I'm a fan of the game of pickleball. I just want to make that clear. I'm a fan of the enthusiasm behind it. And Doug spoke to it at our meeting about being Phoenix, right, Doug? And mentioning that, you can say it better than I can, but you were at a multiplex with tennis courts and pickleball courts.
Right. Yeah. So I can share those photos. I took photos of it when I was there. They had 11 pickleball courts and like about the same amount of tennis courts. And there was about 2 tennis courts full, and there was about 9 pickleball courts full. So it's a growing sport. And if we're going, my thought, man, I get what you're saying. It's that it's not in the plan and that we didn't have it in the survey. And, maybe it should have been an item in the survey, but we didn't have this groundswell when we were doing that survey, those years ago. And it wasn't even that long ago. That's how fast this is growing. We put in 3 courts. I think we initially put in 2 and then we added a 3rd. And I think what we're looking at here is we're just going to fill up 4 courts so quickly that we should plan for that growth and have that availability be there. I think those programs are going to be huge. I think those courts are going to be huge in the summer. a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. That's really. So I started to say philosophically, pickleball, and I've said this over and over again, but it's so multi-generational. That's part of the popularity of it. And as Doug said, the growth of it that I see across the United States, anywhere you go, it's just taken off. And I know it's not in that comp plan, and I understand that. I understand that process, but I think what you've got here is the ability to create a community event, something that kids can walk up, adults can play, any generation they can have access to these courts, and for the amount of money it takes to create those 6 courts, for the amount of use that it will get, anticipated use. I just think it's money really well spent when you look at other things, when you look at across the board items and how money's spent. As I said, I'm not pushing the pickleball agenda. I'm pushing what I know in my heart of hearts. I've been doing tennis all week out on the courts with kids. You know what I'm seeing? Pickleball lines. The tennis coaches are upset right now. They're very upset because all winter long, everywhere I went, there were people playing pickleball. So they were playing pickleball in the tennis courts. They're playing pickleball in the covered areas. They're playing pickleball in a parking lot. So if they're dedicated enough to play in all these different locations and you actually create courts, I think you're going to have an enormous amount of play. It just doesn't require a whole lot of equipment. It doesn't require a whole lot of background and skill. And for a park and recreation district, it is one of those things that I think is just, it speaks to who we are and what we're trying to do in terms of community involvement. So that's my push, just to make it clear. I'm not advocating pickleball all the way. It's more about the opportunity that's coming around the bend. As Doug said, the growth factor is just too phenomenal for us to blindly go, oh, well, let's just create 4. Part of our discussion was the grading aspect. A lot of the work has been done already. When you come in and you start to grade and you're flattening it out and you're bringing in equipment, the amount of money it would take to go back and create 2 more courts after the fact. And then the talk was, just like anything else, the grants and being able to facilitate a big grant and offset some of that with the costs, as Krista said. Barry and his group have, they want to fundraise, they want to dedicate that money to it. They just want to have courts. And so right now they're pulling the trigger on the parking lot because it's there. I think the approach by the district's much wiser in terms of anticipating what's coming down the road. So that's my 2 cents. I'm an advocate for all the right reasons.
Yeah, so just to, agree with you on a number of things, Eric, I feel like of all the things that we can do, the price tag on these actually just isn't that big of a deal. And I think there's a lot of confidence in that. We do put it up for a grant cycle next year. It is going to come through. And yeah, I think I understand they want courts and they want courts now, but I think it makes sense to do this once and do it right. They can still fundraise for it. That would be terrific. In terms of 4 versus 6, I think, citing what was just found out, in terms of the numbers that you quoted for the aquatic center, Matt, numbers just went up on the south end or people who would possibly come down and use the courts. So I think that really says why there should be 6 rather than 4.
There was one more piece too that Carrie brought up, and I think a couple of people brought up, but running tournaments, having gatherings, lessons, tournaments, that fine line between 4 and 6 enables you to do much more. With 4, it's really difficult to pull that off. With 6, you can have invitationals and fundraisers and so on. Krista, I'm sorry.
I did have a question, do there need to be lights?
So these would be unlit courts. At this point, our park closes at dusk anyways. I think what I would look at doing is if we get to the point where we get the artificial turf field, that makes sense because that would be used mostly in the wintertime to be lit. And then at that point, I would look at adding, because it would be right there, adding lights at that point to those courts.
Okay.
I think that would be a better way to phase that. That way we get them their courts earlier and quicker, because the courts themselves, I believe Carrie quoted me a project that was in Suncadia, and I don't remember the exact numbers. Carrie, can you quote that?
It was 75,000 for 3 courts. And just another thing to mention was, I really feel like it will be a boon to the campground to have good access to pickleball courts. I think that will be a good asset, a nice feature, a draw to the campground that doesn't have a lot else as far as besides lovely trees and such. So I think it'll be a real good benefit to that as well.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with that. I would just throw out there that what we'd like to do is just get board approval to move forward with, when we're talking design, to look at 6 courts as opposed to 4. So if you guys want to move and second that, that would be awesome. If not, then we'll stick with 4.
I'll make that motion that we should design and plan for and go forward, try to get 6 pickleball courts.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. The proposal is to go ahead with a possible looking at the design of 6 courts as opposed to 4. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Josh, aye.
Krista, aye.
Matt, aye.
Eric, aye.
Okay, we'll go ahead and do that. That's all I had for the agenda.
I got one item, a new one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one item in new business that wasn't forecast. It came up in the port meeting when we presented. One of the port commissioners, Jack Ing, who's on the Rotary, with you, Doug, indicated that they had money, unspecified amount, but in the neighborhood of $20,000 to $50,000 that they could contribute to the amphitheater project. So I'd just ask if Doug, you can follow up on that, and we can bring that back as an agenda item for the next meeting to find out what is there really that money at the Rotary. Are they interested in sponsoring the project? And if they are, we can get that one moving too.
Yeah, so I've been told by that Rotary Club, that's the morning club, and I've been told by them that money had been reallocated. So I will follow up on that and make sure that we're on the same page.
Okay.
Any other items? Okay, Eric, hearing nothing else, I guess you could adjourn the meeting.
Okay. Wonderful meeting it is. I will now call, adjourn the meeting as 7:05 p.m.
Could everybody send in their email for the vouchers, please?
Everybody send your email.
Will do.
All right, see you guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you.